the symbol of the goddess, the crescent moon. It's been so convoluted, along with a few other things. Towards the end of this video, I'm going to attempt to dispel some of that confusion. I hope you stick around. I will also highlight a really cool substance in our atmosphere called nebelium and some of its nicknames. Things are divinely changing very swiftly. If you are new to my channel or new to any of these concepts, I recommend individually taking anything that stands out to you and researching to your heart's content. You will be guided and you will find some of the most amazing things and connect some of the most amazing dots. I do have quite a few playlists. Tried to organize them so you can check them out. But hopefully you can get a hold of me as well if you have any questions. I have a Patreon. Feel free to contact me through there, whether you're a subscriber to that or not. The ionosphere is heaven on earth. Once we are accessing the ions and utilizing them, I believe we are free. And we have reached higher realms. I believe the magnetosphere, which is magnetic, was keeping us from this electrical energy. I believe the pyramids on Earth are the global electrical grid system that tried to supersede the goddess system, the original system on Earth. I have been mentioning the ionosphere for quite a while now, and I highly recommend that if you're not familiar with it, you go and do a little bit of studying on it, because so much becomes clear when you do. We interact with our environment, obviously, and right now the ionosphere is extremely interactive with our consciousness, with our fascia, with everything on Earth. Like I said, I've mentioned in past videos quite often that we are definitely undergoing an electromagnetic shift. Some of that is coming from the direction of the sun, like I said, but this is happening on a very large scale. And I believe that Goddess Aurora has everything to do with this. What I'm learning about stars and their nebula and the substance that they let off is really interesting. It gets a little complicated, but one area that shows up is the color spectrum. And this green color is very rare as far as astronomy studies had gone previously. So this woman here in 1927 showed that they were emitted by what she's calling doubly ionized oxygen. Now remember, the ionosphere, ionization, ionized. It was so elementally different from other things that they had studied that they actually wanted to make it its very own element. But Fast forward, and they proposed this Nibelium because it had such a different spectra. They named it Nibelium or Nephilium, which I found very, very interesting. They were comparing it to helium, which is also a very important element during this electromagnetic shift, and really anytime the moon is very abundant in helium. So they go on to name it occasionally Nebulium or Nephilium. And it goes on to explain, as I studied, that there are 4 proto-elements that make everything up. And as per usual, the men had to change it. No, I'm just kidding. But it was a woman who termed it Nephilium. But these super rare, basically invisible, but yet still measurable lines were called forbidden lines. They wanted to call them oxygen. So they named them doubly ionized oxygen. So there we have that. Make what you will of it, but I think it's pretty loaded. Now on to the beautiful Beetlejuice, the goddess of the star Betelgeuse. Who knew? In 2019, the year that I mentioned the rapture began and is continuing to be ongoing, Beetlejuice had an event. It seems to be causing a scurry in the science community, as you can imagine. But the really interesting stuff lies between the lines, as usual. So I highly recommend that you take a look at all of these. Take a pause and read the words, because I find them very important to what's happening. Gematria is very adamant that 2019 is the year that Christ returned. When they're speaking about this event, they go on to emphasize that they've never before seen such a huge mass ejection from the surface of a star. They are still speculating as to what it means. I've seen an article that came out really recently that just the wording is kind of gross, honestly, because if it represents this goddess, then I don't think these scientists are speaking very nicely about it. Fast forward again to 2022, and the James Webb Telescope is showing that it is actually still undergoing an event. There's a lot going on, like I've been saying, and some of these things are causing solar flash, which is in turn causing reaction in the magnetosphere. Now, it says that in order to open the door out of Saturn, you open it with pure electricity. I believe that's what's happening. And when correlated with the body, the way that this correlates to the body is through emanation science, which I'm sure we will get to learn much more about soon. I already see it coming out in the science journals more and more. The nervous system to be the Saturn matrix that we are overcoming. I believe that the fascia system is the natural Jupiter human matrix. I believe that's what we are becoming. We are entering our natural state of humanity, the natural blueprint. I don't think we are meant to be in pain and agony and suffering and die a diseased early age. That's just not the way it was meant to work. This is the glorified body process, and this is how it's happening. So as you can see, her name, this is the star Betelgeuse, Al-Uzza, Al-Jauza, Al-Jabbar. Really cool. And she was known as the central one. She comes from the Orion constellation, and the name meant a feminine form, meaning central one. This is where reading between the lines is important, because it just depends on what translation or from which scholars you're reading your information. In ancient illustrations of the constellation, Al-Jauza is clearly a woman. However, later the name changed. Now, this is where I'm excited to bring you this information, because they're coming out with articles reinforcing this yellow color that went on the books suddenly 2,000 years ago. So it says that it changed from the original depictions to this male version, meaning the giant. But as it says here, echoes of the past remain. The star's name, including Betelgeuse, translates as the armpit of the central one, the hand of the central one, or the house of the central one. I reference her story and her story rising because this has been suppressed information. Much of it is coming out now, being unearthed, as we see with all of the different archaeological sites being talked about right now. So then we get to the Romans, and a Roman astronomer who described Betelgeuse as having a similar color to Saturn, which is yellow. Observers from other ancient cultures conspicuously left Betelgeuse out of their list of red stars around that time. This person from the Chinese Han Dynasty independently described it as yellow. So that is where they're getting their records from. An independent astronomer. Something obviously was going on around here. She says, I am not yellow. Shenanigans. That's what went on. Shenanigans. Here's the thing, everything is coded. Our reality is coded, and I can see it. can see a lot of different things when I look deeper and read between the lines. And you can too. For instance, this new article says Beetlejuice has always been a diva, and that it's known as the shoulder on the constellation of Orion. It went through a deep dimming episode a few years ago. It's the other side of the story, and there's a lot to unpack. So it's claiming that 2,000 years ago is when it turned red again. It's saying that's when it put its reddish stage makeup on. And it's claiming that before that it was yellow. Now, the only reason this really stuck out to me is because in Gematria, it says, I am not yellow. And I waited to figure out exactly what that meant. As soon as I read this, I knew. She was known as the mightiest one, or the strong, and associated with fertility and war. She was worshipped with another dude, also another goddess, and another goddess. So 3 chicks and a guy being worshipped, or they say being worshipped, maybe being followed, being guided by. As with many of her sites and statues, they have been destroyed throughout time. Many when Constantine became ruler. This stuff gets really, really convoluted. I really do invite you to stop and read all of this and come to your own understandings. It's really amazing what's happening right now. And my fear was that people would just miss it. Like it's just happening right under our nose, literally. As they continue with their shenanigans, they're naming this rocket. I don't even know. Is it called Orion or Artemis 1? They can't decide what to name their operations and stuff, but there's a lot there. That's all very telling. So it's being scrubbed because of the hydrogen. Well, Christ is hydrogen. She is the hydrogen. So it's not going to go properly until they get it together. One cool thing that one of the guys said on here, I think I had to mute the sound, but essentially the orange burns because of the hydrogen burning impurities from the air. So what do you think all of the red sunsets that we're seeing and sunrises are? It is this purification, the red purifier, just like it speaks about in the Hopi prophecy. You guys, we've got this. Don't listen to them. They'll just scare you and lie to you. Trust your heart, because that is her. We all carry it. Going forward, I wish for the truth to be out there just as much as the lie, so that people can truly, sovereignly choose and learn and be guided. We can always be guided by our hearts, no matter what. But we have to go back to the heart from the consciousness that has risen. We will catch up with ourselves. We will.